Okay, well, hello again, PCL followers and friends, Facebook and YouTube as well. Um, Good to be back here again on Monday. And I have a special guest, but he's having some technical difficulties with getting on the stream. So we are going to get started without him. And hopefully, Brian can join us in the next few minutes or so. So if you are on this live, please go ahead and just say where you're calling from, where you're writing in from, where you're watching from. Just put your city or your state or your country and your name in the comments. Actually, your name will come up anyway. So just put your city, your state, or your country in the comments. And so, welcome to PCL Live, Purpose Center Leadership Live. And while you guys are getting started, I wanted to remind you guys that this is the last week before we kick off our leadership community, which is called Communally. And the link is in our About page at the top, or we're going to be placing it in the feed as well. But this is your last week to join a leadership community, which is going to be more intimate with opportunities to collaborate with other leaders, share best practices in a safe space. I will be teaching once per week, as well as my special guests, professors and other leadership thought leaders. We'll be teaching once per week. We may also be working through one of Maxwell's training. We're not sure yet. We're going to wait until the group gets together to decide. And if you miss, it will not be an issue because the content will be recorded and stored. And we will be having the community itself in a LinkedIn group, the private community. So go ahead. It's your last week to sign up. And so we're going to be placing the link in the feed for you guys to get signed up today, especially for those of you guys who are really serious about leadership. Hello, Patricia from LA, Maria from Virginia, Agnes from Anchorage, Melissa from Cincinnati, Lorraine from South Africa, Valfried from Tennessee, Michigan's in the house, Sanford, Florida, Christine, Janet from Chicago, Theron from South Carolina, next door, my neighbor, Jessica from Cleveland, Natasha from the UK, Janet from South Carolina. Thank you guys all for coming on. Derma from New York, Palm Beach County. Actually, I'm going to be down there soon. Palm Beach, Florida, Ruth, and of course, Bogota. So I have a special guest today. I was really excited to have him on our show because he actually reached out to me to be on the show, and he had some great ideas to how we can build and develop teams, right? And he has some really good strategies. So I'm hoping he can get on, but if not, I'm going to jump right in because I know your time is precious. Johnny from New Mexico and all you guys, I'm going to actually depend on you guys this week to also put your ideas and thoughts in the comments. And so Brian, who was going to be my guest, he actually started out with three from his experience, three things that he felt, right? Three actions, three ways of working with teams that he felt from what his experience that he felt were instrumental for building and maintaining teams, especially in today's environment. And I want to know if you guys agree with him. So he said the first thing that he feels like teams are needing right now is security, right? So security. But what I want to know, right, in today's environment, what does security look like? See, back in, I would say pre-COVID days, security was a job for life, right? Security was, okay, I'm in this job and I'm going to be here for a while. And then COVID happens and then we realize that nothing is really secure. However, Brian feels like security was very instrumental in building strong teams. And so I would love to know your guys' thoughts on that, right? On how important is security now and what does security means to you? And the second that I really agree with is growth. It says they need to learn more over time and be challenged past the day-to-day comfort zone. I always believe that if you're not growing, right, if you're not growing, you're dying. right? So whether you're a leader or you are a team member, you want to be in an environment where you're growing, and not because you're working from home, right? Especially today, doesn't mean that you no longer want to develop yourself, right? Because no one knows where this stuff is going to end up, right? Right now for this season in corporate America, in the world, right? Right now, we're all wanting to stay at home for the most part. Let me see. This is my guess. Okay, yeah. So we're all wanting to stay home for the most part, right? So, but we don't know where this is going to end up. So, continuing to grow, continuing to grow. Oh, Naderma said he wished these had captions. Naderma, I think there's a way, and maybe it's on the replay where you can put the captions on, but unfortunately, it has to first end, and then when it's ended, the replay will show where you can put the captions on. So sorry that you can't hear it right now. But yeah, so growth is going to be very important. Personal growth, career growth. So I think I talk about this week after week. There is this tension, and I think Morgan Stanley, I think it was, doubled down on what they believe. They still believe that it is better for employees to be in the office, right? Because they feel that's where maybe real growth happens, where you can, I guess, see how an employee is performing. And so we're still having this tension between what employers really want and what employees want. But I do know, though, that growth is important. So even though you are at home, let me just say this to employees, even though you are at home, you should continue to try to grow yourself, right? So if your company at this point does not have a training program for you because of all the disruption, I suggest that you get into some type of an online group. We're doing Community, for example, which is a low cost growth community for those who are wanting to be leaders, right? Because let me just say this to managers. Managers, I have some kind of like bad news for you, right? There's a lot of talk that the management ranks, the managerial ranks, is going to be eroded over time because with this new workforce, with this post-corona, or I guess we're still in corona, with this new workforce, they're still trying to find a role for managers, right? Managers' roles are going to be redefined. So if you are already in management, if you are a manager on this live right now, hear me and hear me well. Your next step is to try to figure out how to grow your leadership, how to grow your leadership skills. That's the next thing for you. We got to get a management mindset where manager manage things and manage processes. That's all well and good, but you need to develop your leadership skills. And joining our community at Community is a very low cost way for you to grow and develop the leader within you, because management roles is being looked at and being redefined because people are dispersed. People are dispersed, right? Employees are dispersed. And now employees, here's what's happening. Here's what's happening, employees, because employees are choosing to be remote, right? And they're choosing flexibility. Guess what? Your competitors now are not just people in, let's say, your country or your state, right? Your competitors are people now all over the world, because if we're going to be in a hybrid or remote environment, well, we can get talent from everywhere, right? Third world countries, first world countries, everywhere. So it's going to be important that you grow your skills. Don't relax. Right now, it feels like it's an employee's market, but guess what? Don't sit on your laurels with that, right? Don't sit on your laurels with that, because your competitors are now coming from other countries that are lower cost than maybe you. Like here in the US, the rates are going up for what we're demanding, employers are demanding, and that's good for now for the season. However, as companies look to expand beyond the borders of the US for talent, there's going to be maybe a better bargain, a better price point for people outside of the US. So you're gonna have to make yourself, no one's indispensable, right? But you're gonna have to try to make yourself indispensable. And the way to do that is to continue to grow your skills, right? Grow, personally develop. Let's see. Brandy said, "You must always strive to learn and grow daily." I mean, it's this is a this economy is a knowledge economy. I don't know if you guys have heard that. It's a knowledge economy right now. Okay, so this is where we're at, right? So the more you know, the better. Paul says developing partnerships to strengthen the behavioral health infrastructure and capacity is in indigenous communities and the well-being of people of color. Paul, if you might want to expand on that, I'm not quite sure what you were trying to say. Brandon says LinkedIn Learning is an excellent tool. I agree with you. There's some great courses on LinkedIn Learning. So this Burak says growth has to be a continuous process. It really has to be. And so, be mindful of that. And Brian, my guest, who unfortunately could not log in today, he mentioned that contribution is what employees are looking for as well. They want to know that what they do matters, right? That what they do ties to the vision, is taking the team to the right direction. Okay, so if you're an employee, and this is, let me speak to the employers first. I agree with Brian. Employee wants to know if what they're doing ties into the overall mission and vision. And you've heard me say this week after week, right? Especially to talk about culture, vision, mission, values, right? Even more so in this COVID or post-COVID environment, even more so, vision, mission, values. And so employees want to know, is what that person doing fitting in to the overall mission? And I used to say this to managers when I train managers, that managers should have their own vision and mission for their departments that ties into the overall vision and mission. That they should create their own departmental statement, okay, that ties into the overall mission and vision, so that the people they're managing feel like they're a part of the bigger picture. But with the management level being potentially eroded, then it's so important that leaders speak with employees, right, and let them know if what they are doing ties into the overall mission. They want to know that their work matters. Okay. Okay, here's what James said. The trick is being able to show what skills you have. Oh, I think my guest Brian, let me see if I'm able to get him on the stream. Hold on one sec. Brian. Well, Brian, you're in our stream, but I'm not sure if you're hearing us. I think Brian's still having technical difficulties. Brian, if you can hear us, I may have to remove Brian back till he gets that resolved. Okay, so Brian's still having some technical difficulties. Try to get him on here, but unfortunately, he's still having issues. So, all right. So I'd love to know what you guys think about that so far, right? What I've been seeing too, as I work with clients and when it comes to team building, and I've said this week after week, communication. And I was reading something my husband was sharing with me recently. The way how employers are thinking now, seeing that they're losing the fight about getting employees back into the office. So what we're looking at now, what employers are looking at now, employers are looking at ways, right, how to bring the team together, right? Whether that's half yearly, quarterly, because we know that after a while, working from home can get lonely. And as an advocate for work from home, there are times when you do want to be in an environment with your peers. And so I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on that, right? Whether you believe that a quarterly in-person meeting is enough? Would you want it more often? Would you want it monthly? I think monthly may be too much. Quarterly or half yearly, because that's the new trend now. Employers, in order to attract really good employees, are finding creative destinations for their in-person meetings. And so there's so much going on in this space right now. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, I'm gonna try to get Brian back here again. Brian, any luck? Can you hear us?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. All right, Brian. We can hear and we can see you. So I was
Great.
going um from your notes, Brian, that you had sent to me. So I want you to jump right in. We were talking about the needs, right? You said there were three emotional needs that you identified in your space that teams need. So why don't you first introduce yourself and tell us what you do, and then you can jump into it. Glad you could
Great.
make
Yeah,
it.
my name's glad I figured it out. Sorry about the technical difficulty. Yeah, my name's Brian, and I do work for a large Catholic hospital system that I'm based here out of Indianapolis. Their home location is out of St. Louis, but we're pretty much scattered throughout the United States. And right now I work in the accounts payable area as an accountant, working for the accounting team, but assisting them on processes and alternative pay um, issues and that type of thing, as well as focus on controls. So that's kind of where my team stands. And then we do all the centralized accruals across all of the entire hospital system. So that's kind of where I work. And if you can think in terms of accounting, we do have a great deal of pressure on us to meet month-end close timelines, especially in a ever-changing environment. So it's been challenging over the 8 years, and that's where I started a lot of my research on this topic. And that's where I decided, I looked at relationships and I looked beyond just like the family relationship or the marital relationship. You take those human needs and you apply them to associates, you can start to see where it really fits in nicely to help understand what they need and keep them motivated to stay with the company, especially in an ever changing and difficult and very demanding environment. To meet those needs helps keep on the retention side of it, because it's very expensive, I found, to replace people, and I really didn't want to have to replace anybody. I really wanted to bring them along within the organization and build them up. And so that's kind of where this came from. And so what I decided was the three basic needs that people need is obviously security. That comes from financial security, but it also comes into, will I have a job, right? And will
Mm-hmm.
I always be able to count on that ongoing, not over a short term, but over long term, especially in an ever changing environment. The other one would be, is what I do valuable, right? And so they really want to feel like, they're contributing to the organization in a very meaningful way. And so you want to keep that out in front of them. And the last one I like to focus on is growth. You can't just keep doing the same thing month over month. You have to really evolve the team and grow them as time goes on. If they keep doing the same thing over and over again, they're going to lose interest. And it's been said, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? So you don't want your
Absolutely.
associates to die on the vine. You really want to enhance them and move them forward in the organization. And so that's kind of the three areas that I focused on. You obviously can't hit all human needs, but if you do look at, those three key ones, especially from an accounting perspective, the security is obviously number one. But as you start to develop the associates and grow the associates, you really see that they stay on over the long term. And I really wanted to shrink down any of my turnover rates and keep them very small, and only a few people would leave. And as my team grew over time and the changes did occur, the only movement that we primarily saw was my team leaving, the overall, what I call centralized function, and moving into more of what we have market team functions. So they actually stay within the company. They just move to do other things within the company, which I fully support because that is adding to their growth and their value to the overall organization. And so that's kind of where this came from. And that's what I focused on for the past 8 years.
Okay, so I want to jump on the security question because James asked a good question, right? Um,
Mhm.
he says, how would team building work given the pull of the gig economy? The team will be forever in flux. And it goes back to the whole good question, James. And it goes back to the whole point of security for me, which I feel like I said earlier before you got on, Brian, that security for me is also in flux, right? Job security. Because what is that now? I know what you're saying. People want to feel like they're secure, like in the Maslow hierarchy of needs, let me get my basic needs met. I have a job, I'm secure. However, last year showed us that there was no real security because so many people were laid off. And even more surprising is so many of those people who got laid off don't want to come back to work, or they don't want to come back to work the way things were. They're redefining what security looks like for them. And to James' point, the gig economy, which is offering a lot more flexibility, is a real pull and a real draw. So team building is really right now. Team building is a huge, I don't want to say headache, but it's a huge issue right now as companies are just trying to figure out how to manage their remote teams. It's hard enough managing your team when they were there in the office. Now trying to manage a remote team, trying to manage a hybrid team is just so much more difficult nowadays. And I know I asked you, Brian, you said that your team, they were all remote, correct?
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
so
And so,
go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, in my team, being remote is more focused than what we were in the office. Because, in the office setting, it felt like we're going from meeting to meeting and everybody's going their own different ways and working their own different projects and weren't really that connected. And so, even though when we're in the office, we kind of did the agile team huddle in the morning meetings. We did it in conference rooms then, but now we do it over the phone. We really find that there's where we stay connected, and there's where we try to work on what is going to be value added. And I firmly believe that the security comes from knowing that you're adding value, that as long as you're doing the things that's important to the organization, then your likelihood of losing your job or becoming really not relevant anymore diminishes. And as a leader, this is where really I think is difficult. And you look at human needs and building that security is how am I as a leader getting ahead of that and having a vision to say, okay, what matters now? What can we be working on as a team now that's going to be relevant over the long haul, and continue working down those paths and building what I call the pipeline of activities that keeps them really relevant and sticky to the organization. And that's where I think from a leadership perspective, we have to really step up and help that out. You can't just go on the laurels of here's what we've always done. You've got to keep looking ahead and trying to find those things that what is it that is going to be making your team stand out as a team that's adding value back to your organization and doing the right things and taking care of what I call my internal customer, right? And so that's kind of
Right.
how I focus. And then the other side of the coin is I'm not going to overstaff them, right? I'm going to try to use a staffing model in the past is what I've done to get the right people in the right spot, as many as you need, but no more, so that you're not always on, well, you're over budget, right? You have too much on your head count. You need to get reduced down. I always try to stay ahead of that by keeping pretty lean in my staffing so that everybody has a job and only adding as we added more work and then bringing on the right level of staffing for that.
Well, I think right before our eyes, Brian, the culture is just changing so much, honestly. Like it's changing literally, I would say weekly. I read a lot on this stuff, a lot on culture. And even as I'm looking in the comments in the feed, right? Larry's saying security comes now. Larry's definition of security is that security comes from multiple income streams. In the gig economy, it's multiple jobs to distribute risk. It can also mean job and side business, and there are people agreeing with Larry, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Sherry said it's like having a leader slash therapist to keep the remote culture engaged with the organization. So right now, and Sherry, you're right with that, right? So Larry's saying security for him now is no longer the one job situation. It's, you know what? It's what I talked about last week about being an entrepreneur. Is people are, one step from entrepreneurship is entrepreneur if you want to stay within your company. And so
Correct.
what's happening now, people are trying to venture out as entrepreneurs, and if they're going to stay within a company, they want a different type of responsibility. And because, as Sherry's pointing out, the remote culture requires a different type of leadership skill. It's like she's saying, it's almost like you need a therapist. It's one of the things that people want to feel, yeah, they want security, but it's a different kind of security now, right? They want to grow, they want to be nurtured, they want empathy, they want all these things. And so the playbook of what security looked like, the playbook of what work look like is changing. And I think leaders are trying to catch up. And boy, I feel like leaders are not catching up fast enough. And it's the reason why they're talking about the Great Resignation. So many people are leaving the workforce to go try it on their own. It's a very interesting time, Brian. Larry says leaders need to build culture virtually and have an agile mindset. They sure do. It's different. It's different the way how employees look at security now. It's different the way how employees look. But your growth argument, about keep growing, that's important. And I was mentioning earlier before you came on the feed, Brian, that employees need to take it upon themselves to grow too. They can't wait on the leaders at this point. Grow yourself, because the competition now, because we're virtual, is a lot more. It's a lot bigger than just who's in your town. But when it was a brick and mortar building, your competitors are people in your town, in your city, in your driving distance to work, right? Geographic area, right? Right now, the competition is worldwide. If we're gonna go with remote work, it's gonna be worldwide. I mean, I'm interviewing virtual assistants from El Salvador, from India, just America, but from everywhere, and trying to get the best rate and the best skill set. So your competitors are all over this world right now. So it's a whole different time that we're in. But for those companies, Brian, who do want to maintain some type of a team culture and team structure, is a lot of work. And yes, they're going to have to find a way, to your 3 points, to have those employees feel somewhat secure, but they have to redefine security, offer opportunities for growth the best way they can. And the last thing you had mentioned that I like was about contribution, where that employee feels valued, right? That what they're doing really ties into the eventual mission of the organization. And so, Brian, I'm going to give you the last word, because we're at the 28-minute mark. I know we had some challenges you're getting on, but I don't like to have the show go over 30 minutes. So I'm going to give you the last couple words.
All right. So, yeah, and I think you're right. It's the last piece that's the contribution that I think keeps them around. If they always feel like they're valued, but you have to make sure they know they're valued, right? And recognized for what they do. And that's not just pay increases or spot bonuses. It's public, recognition, or, a lot of times I'll thank them through instant message for something that they've done for me. And you just got to have that sense of gratitude towards each and every one of them, because they really do want to be valued for what they do. Yeah, I think, especially in the earlier days, you spend a lot of time at work. And if you're there just to make a paycheck, and just really be a grind. And I think it's someplace where they need to feel like they belong, right? And that contribution, that recognition for it has to be ongoing by a leader, and very heartful. It can't just be, yeah, thanks, and move on. It's got to be heartful, so they know that you really care about them. So that is very critical to that one. And you know, the last point, especially in like you said, this gig world, you got to
Yeah.
stay on top. That entrepreneurship is key as a leader. You got to be out in front, getting these people the right kind of opportunities to grow their knowledge of the company, their skill sets, etc. And then that whole virtual huddle to me is very critical. That's where we do all of our learning. This is where we share with one another what we've learned or what we've done and how we've gone about doing it. So it doesn't stay within a silo, you know. And then the last thing, we make sure that we cross train everybody so everybody is equally capable to pick up for somebody else. And that then builds that team and family dynamic that you want that stays in place over the long haul.
Yes, yes. And Larry says even a hybrid work requires a digital first mindset. The office is not just another site in a work from anywhere culture. And it is a work from anywhere culture right now. And you know, leaders have a lot of catching up to do. And as James says, they aren't catching up. And if they're not catching up, they're going to be left behind by tech. And a lot of leaders are not
Yeah,
willing to learn. And James, I have seen that, James Care, that they're not willing to pivot. Really, they're not willing to learn, and they're unfortunately going to be left behind, as so many employees are demanding more now. And
correct.
for those of you again who are on this feed, right? I mentioned before, I am starting a leadership community next week, and it's for current leaders, aspiring leaders, and managers. Because managers, your role is being redefined as we speak. Because with employees dispersed globally, um, your role is being redefined. And so you want to develop your leadership skills because we're going to be needing more leaders than managing of processes, right? And so communally, there's a link. If you're on LinkedIn, there's a link in our about section. I've put a link in the feed here. Click on it. We kick off next week, Tuesday. All trainings will be recorded. It will be myself and other leadership professors, as well as other leadership thought leaders. They'll be recorded, and there'll be a community, a private community on LinkedIn, in a LinkedIn group, where we will have ongoing discussion. And so I just want to thank Brian for joining us today, and thank you for pushing through, Brian, despite the difficulties. And thank you all for joining us here every Monday at 2. And so if you guys are watching and it's not 2 o'clock on Monday Eastern time, remember you're a team replay, hashtag team replay, and I will continue to answer your questions. Take care. Until next week.